The morning light had not fully broken when Marcus and Serenia finally reached the outskirts of Rome. The cold wind pressed against their faces, carrying the heaviness of a journey that had tested not only their bodies, but every remaining thread of their spirit. Years of surviving Mongol brutality and wandering through hostile lands had carved resilience into Marcus's bones, yet returning to Rome brought a different kind of tremor, one born not from fear of death but from fear of belonging nowhere. In the distance, the towering Roman walls rose like silent judges, and Marcus felt the weight of a lost childhood pressing against his ribs. Roman soldiers patrolling the gate noticed them and immediately raised their spears. The suspicion in their eyes sharpened when they saw Serenia, whose features bore unmistakable traces of the Mongol steppes. Marcus stepped forward instinctively, but the soldiers surrounded them with swift precision, studying the worn leather, the dust-coated clothes, and the hardened expression on Marcus's face. His movements carried the discipline of the East, not the familiar posture of a Roman youth. Instead of recognition or welcome, he found hostility, an echo of a truth he had long feared. He no longer looked Roman. The soldiers bound them with iron chains and dragged them inside the military outpost where General Arsenios waited. The general's eyes held the coldness of a man who had buried more comrades than he could remember. He examined Marcus as though searching for the slightest hint of deception hidden beneath his bruised skin. Marcus felt the sting of shame and helplessness. His voice, shaped by years of Mongol language, trembled and failed to carry the certainty he wished to express. In the general's stern silence, Marcus understood that Rome trusted steel more than stories. He was taken to the arena at dawn, where thousands of Romans had gathered to witness judgment through combat. The weight of the moment pressed against his chest as he stepped onto the sand, standing alone beneath the vast stone arches. His pulse echoed the roar of the crowd, though his expression remained still, carved by a decade of surviving storms he never chose. Across from him stood a line of Roman soldiers, full armor, sharpened blades, trained stances. Marcus, with nothing but bare hands and memory, understood that this was not a trial. It was a resurrection or a burial. At the signal, the first soldier charged. Marcus reacted with the instinct of a boy forged in captivity, moving with the swiftness he had learned in the unforgiving camps of the steppe. He evaded the blade by an inch, twisting with a grace he did not know he possessed, and struck with precision that sent the soldier collapsing into the sand. A hush fell across the arena. The next two attacked together, their armored steps shaking the ground. Marcus flowed between them like wind that knew the shape of every rock, disabling one with a sweep and the other with a strike that echoed the violence of years lost. Shock rippled through the watching crowd. The strength in Marcus's limbs came not from training halls but from endless nights of running, fighting, and refusing to die. His movements reflected both Mongol agility and Roman grit, a rare fusion that neither side would ever claim. One soldier after another fell at his feet. Dust rose in broken spirals around him, catching the light as if the arena itself glowed with the harsh truth of his journey. His breath remained controlled, his eyes sharp, carrying the memory of the valley, the storms, and every hardship that had taught him to adapt or perish. When the last soldier finally hit the ground, silence washed over the arena. Marcus stood alone amid scattered shields and wounded pride, his chest rising and falling with quiet resolve. General Arsenios stepped forward, the disbelief etched across his face revealing a rare crack in his iron composure. He studied Marcus's posture, the raw determination in his expression, and the quiet fire smoldering within his eyes. It dawned on him that this boy's strength had not been shaped by any legion. This was the strength of survival, of a life torn apart and rebuilt piece by piece. Arsenios raised his hand, and the arena erupted. The general had accepted Marcus into Roman territory. Serenia exhaled a breath she had been holding since dawn, yet the relief she felt was shadowed by uncertainty. Marcus knew that acceptance in Rome came in fragments, not in certainty. As he walked through the camp, the curious and suspicious gazes of Roman citizens followed him. They whispered about his appearance, his foreign movements, and his uncanny fighting skill. Rome had opened its gates for him, but its people had not opened their hearts. Night fell over the camp, bringing with it a quiet that only disguised unrest. Marcus sat under the pale torchlight, replaying the day's violence in his mind. Every motion he had made in the arena had been born from fear, desperation, and survival. He wondered whether Rome could ever understand him, not as a warrior they could use, but as a boy who had once belonged here. The mountains in the distance glowed faintly, and Marcus sensed that the enemy who had haunted his childhood had not vanished. They were merely gathering their strength. Before dawn, the alarm horns shattered the silence. Soldiers rushed toward the walls, their faces drained of color. Marcus sprinted behind them, his heart pounding with a familiar dread. He climbed the stone steps and stared into the darkness beyond the valley, where faint glimmers of fire flickered like scattered stars. The rumble of approaching horses vibrated through the ground. The Mongols had come again. But this time, Marcus did not feel like the orphaned child of Rome. He stood as a man forged in two worlds, ready to face the storm rushing toward the gates. The echoes of the alarm horn lingered in the cold morning air as soldiers scrambled across the camp, tightening armor and gripping weapons with trembling hands. Marcus ascended the wall with a steady pace, but inside him, the storm of an old memory churned violently. The faint gleam of distant torches flickered through the mountain fog, and the low thunder of hooves pulsed like an approaching heartbeat. The Romans around him shifted uneasily. This was not an enemy they fully understood. But Marcus did. The Mongols were not simply arriving, they were hunting, their presence carved with intention, precision, and a relentless focus that made the air itself feel hostile. General Arsenio stood rigid at the battlements, his gaze sharp yet shadowed with growing uncertainty. Marcus sensed the soldiers' unease. They had fought rebellions, bandits, and distant tribes, but the Mongol steppe-born ferocity carried something alien, something that drew strength from speed and unpredictability. As the first wave emerged from the valley darkness, Marcus noted their formation, the rhythm of their approach, and the unmistakable scent of burning pitch drifting on the wind. These were not scouts. This was a calculated strike designed to shatter Roman confidence before the sun even touched the horizon. The initial impact came with a blaze of fire as flaming arrows streaked upward, scattering into the wooden watchtowers. A rush of heat and sparks erupted, and the crackling sound of burning timber echoed across the wall. Roman archers faltered. Their formation wavered as panic tugged at discipline. Marcus stepped forward, studying the Mongol pattern. He recognized the cadence of their advance, the spacing of riders, the shifting waves of movement honed by years of battlefield cunning. He signaled the nearest soldiers and repositioned them with the instinct of someone who had survived a lifetime under the same war cries now rising from below. The Mongols surged like a living tide, their horses cutting through the terrain with fierce precision. Marcus seized a fallen shield and moved with fluid decisiveness across the wall, guiding the archer's aim by anticipating the Mongols' evasive maneuvers. Arrows flew, but these riders were taught to dance with death. They turned, dipped, and twisted in uncanny synchrony. The Romans were brave, but bravery alone could not match the speed and ferocity that charged through the valley. Marcus felt the old rhythm return to his body, that instinct sharpened by years of captivity, shaping him into a bridge between two worlds. When the Mongols launched their second assault, their momentum shook even the stone beneath the soldiers' feet. Marcus leapt down from the battlement, moving into the central courtyard where chaos had erupted. The Mongol riders broke through one of the weak wooden barricades, and a stream of them flooded inside the camp. Marcus intercepted them like a force summoned out of the dust. He swung the shield with brutal precision, knocking a rider off his mount, then used the momentum of another's attack to throw him onto the ground. The soldiers witnessing this drew strength from his defiance, and rallied behind him, forming a tighter defensive line. Smoke thickened across the battlefield as heat from the burning towers mixed with the cold mountain wind. Marcus advanced with every breath, guiding soldiers toward higher ground and pulling the injured out of danger. He remembered the Mongols' unspoken rules, their moments of hesitation, the weaknesses in their formation that only someone who had lived among them could recognize. Each action he took cut through the chaos, reshaping defeat into resistance. With every Mongol that fell beneath Roman steel, or the force of Marcus's blows, the camp's despair began to shift into determination. After what felt like an hour of relentless combat, the Mongol line wavered. Their horses circled back, their riders withdrawing into the mist as though vanishing into the mountain itself. The attack had been sharp, violent, and deliberate, but brief. Too brief. Marcus stood among the ruins of the barricade, breathing hard, scanning the darkness. He felt no relief. This was not how the Mongols fought when conquest was their goal. There had been no attempt to press deeper, no siege machines, no second wave poised to break the spirit of the defenders. This attack had the scent of something personal, something aimed with precision rather than ambition. General Arsenios moved slowly toward Marcus, stepping around fallen soldiers and shattered shields. His expression was grim, and though he said nothing, his silence carried the weight of a man confronting a truth he did not want to accept. Marcus sensed that the general's perspective had shifted. The boy he had doubted now stood as the only reason the camp had not been overrun. Yet beneath the gratitude lingered an unspoken fear that Marcus himself was the storm drawing the enemy closer. The general's eyes followed the trail of hoofprints leading deeper into Roman lands, and unease tightened his jaw. As dawn approached, a scouting party returned with unsettling news. Several Mongol riders seen during the attack had not retreated with the main force. Instead, they had slipped away, threading through the forest paths toward the south, the direction of Rome's heartlands. Marcus felt the cold grip of realization settle upon him. The scattered raiders were not lost, nor were they regrouping. They were advancing with purpose, following a thread tied not to Rome, but to him. The fear he had carried since childhood resurfaced, sharper now, because he understood something the others did not. Enemies like these did not pursue cities. They pursued bloodlines. Marcus stood alone near the remnants of the burnt watchtower, the rising sun casting long shadows across the ruined camp. Smoke curled into the sky like dark omens, and the chill of morning wrapped itself around him. He felt the unease in the earth beneath his feet, an echo of the same dread he had known as a boy witnessing his family's fall. Now that fear bore a new face, the realization that the Mongols had not come to conquer Rome. They had come to find him. As the golden light of dawn crept over the mountains, Marcus understood that the true war had only begun, and its battlefield stretched far. The morning light revealed a camp drowned in smoke and uncertainty. Roman soldiers moved through the wreckage with heavy steps, their armor stained by the remnants of a battle that had ended too suddenly and too cleanly. Marcus stood among them, not as a victor but as someone swallowed by an uneasy silence. The air carried the scent of burnt wood and cold ash, yet beneath it lingered something far more unsettling, a sense that the attack had been nothing more than a warning. The Mongols had not come to break Rome. They had come to test the distance between them and the boy who had escaped their grasp so many years ago. General Arsenios studied the battlefield with the detached precision of a man who had seen many campaigns, yet something about this one pierced deeper than any before. As his gaze swept across the fallen Mongol bodies, it halted upon the strange insignia etched into their armor, an emblem Marcus recognized instantly. Long-forgotten memories resurfaced with violent clarity, memories of the night his childhood burned, the same mark glinting on the arms of the men who stormed his home. Marcus felt his heartbeat shift, not with fear but with a dark acknowledgement that destiny had circled back to confront him. Away from the ruins, Serenia walked through the quiet corridors of the camp, her steps slow, her eyes shadowed by truths she had carried for years. Marcus followed her into a secluded space, where the distant sounds of repairing soldiers faded into a low hum. She drifted her hand across a scorched wooden beam, her expression hollow with the burden of knowledge. The Mongol Empire she had once known was vast and divided, filled with ambitions and rivalries that stretched beyond simple conquest. And within those divisions lay the origin of the hunt that had never stopped chasing Marcus since the night his family died. Serenia revealed the threads of that long pursuit, not with words, but with the quiet stillness of someone unmasking a wound. Marcus had always believed his family was wiped out in a brutal raid, another casualty of war, yet the truth was far more calculated. His father had not been an ordinary man. He had belonged to a forgotten Roman lineage tied to an ancient symbol, one that had fallen into obscurity and legend. The ring Marcus carried was not merely a family heirloom. It was a key that certain Mongol factions believed could unlock influence far greater than territory or gold. It was a relic etched with meaning lost to all but a few. As Serenia's gaze met his, Marcus felt the ground beneath his past shift. He remembered his father's trembling hand pressing the ring into his palm, the urgency in his dying breath. It had not been a simple farewell, it had been a transfer of responsibility, a silent plea to protect something Rome itself had forgotten. Marcus's childhood had been shattered not by chance, but by a deliberate chase born from greed and prophecy. He realized then that the men who had burned his home had never stopped searching, they had simply lost his trail for a time, only to rediscover it the moment he resurfaced. General Arsenios, upon learning fragments of this truth, felt both awe and unease settle into his bones. For years he had defended Rome against visible enemies, yet he now faced a threat woven from shadows and ancient motives. His instincts told him that Marcus's presence was more than coincidence. The boy carried something Rome might one day need but had long neglected to remember. The camp's atmosphere thickened with tension as soldiers whispered among themselves, their fear amplified by the realization that the Mongols were no longer a distant danger but a force threading into the heart of their empire. Throughout the day, scouts returned with reports that confirmed Marcus's deepest fears. The scattered Mongol riders seen escaping into the forests were not retreating, they were advancing deeper into Roman land, following hidden routes known only to war bands accustomed to slipping through borders like shifting wind. Their erratic movements formed a pattern Marcus recognized, a pattern used by hunters to box and prey before the final strike. But this time their prey was not an army, not a city, but a single young man who carried a ring older than their own tribes. Marcus walked along the camp's perimeter as dusk settled, the fading sunlight casting long shadows that danced on the ground like reminders of the past he could no longer outrun. He felt the ancient weight of the ring upon his finger, its once insignificant metal now hotter than fire. Every heartbeat reminded him of the family he had lost, the nights filled with fear, and the long path that had shaped him into a warrior no empire could fully claim. Rome had given him a place to stand, but not a shelter strong enough to keep fate from reaching him again. Soldiers whispered his name with a mixture of reverence and dread. He had saved them in battle, yet they sensed danger clinging to him like a shadow. Marcus knew that he could not blame them. The truth he carried was as heavy as the mountains beyond the valley. The Mongols who hunted him were driven by a purpose deeper than conquest, one fueled by a belief that the ring he bore would restore power to a forgotten sect lost within the vast Mongol hierarchy. That belief had already destroyed his family, and now, it threatened to engulf the empire offering him refuge. That night, as the final embers of fire cracked beneath the star-flecked sky, Marcus looked beyond the camp toward the dark line of trees. Somewhere in that darkness, his hunters moved with silent determination, drawing ever closer. He felt their presence like cold fingers pressing against the back of his neck. The attack at dawn had been only the beginning, a declaration that the chase had resumed. Now the truth stood bare before him. His past had not been left behind in the ashes of childhood. It had followed him across continents and through empires, and it had finally reached Rome's gates. The war that awaited him was not Rome's war. It was his.